You've been lied to your entire life about fried chicken. Every joke you've heard, every stereotype you've seen, every racist comment that's been made, it's all been designed to hide one of the most powerful stories in Black history. The truth is, fried chicken didn't make Black people a punchline. It helped our ancestors obtain freedom and built the lives of thousands of Black Americans. But white America has spent over a century making sure you never knew that. Picture this. It's 1800s Virginia. Your ancestors are enslaved, but they're not just surviving. They're thriving in ways their oppressors never expected. See, while white folks controlled everything else on those plantations, there was one thing they couldn't control: Black ingenuity. And there was one thing enslaved people were actually allowed to have: chickens. That's right. Out of all the animals on the plantation, chickens were the only ones enslaved people could raise for themselves. White folks thought they were being generous. What they actually did was hand our ancestors the keys to their own economic revolution. In 1847, a Northerner named Adam Foster visited Virginia and wrote a letter to his daughter describing what he observed. Enslaved people had gardens at every dwelling, kept poultry, fished the rivers, and sold oysters that would cost 3 cents each in Boston. By day, they worked the fields under their master's control. But after hours, enslaved people developed what historians now call the slave economy, a network of trade and commerce that operated alongside the official plantation system. Enslaved families would trade chickens, eggs, and vegetables among themselves, then sell surplus goods to free Black people in nearby towns. These free Black merchants would then sell to white store owners who were willing to buy quality goods regardless of their source. The profits from these transactions would flow back to the enslaved families who had produced the original goods. This system became surprisingly profitable for those who mastered it. Moses, an enslaved man in Russell County, operated what he called his continental traffic in poultry and other goods. By the time authorities discovered his operation, Moses had accumulated around $1,000, wealth that exceeded most white families of the era. The white authorities called it stealing, but for enslaved people, it was one of the few ways to accumulate money and gain some measure of economic independence within an oppressive system. By the way, if you're enjoying the content so far and want to see more untold Black stories, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread this message together, gang. Let me tell you about some of the most successful businesswomen in American history. They didn't have business degrees or startup capital, but they had something more powerful: determination and culinary skills that couldn't be matched. The place was Gordonsville, Virginia. By the time the Civil War broke out, this small town had become a major railroad junction where 2 train lines intersected. Trains would stop to pick up passengers and freight, but there was one problem: no dining cars. Hungry travelers had nowhere to get food during their journey. Black women in the area saw an opportunity where others saw nothing. These women, many of them recently freed from slavery, would prepare elaborate meals at home, then carry the food in large baskets balanced on their heads down to the train platform. When a train pulled into the station, passengers would lean out of the open windows and smell aromas wafting up from the platform below. Fried chicken, fresh biscuits, pies, cakes, all prepared to perfection by women who had learned their craft in plantation kitchens but were now cooking for their own profit. The operation became so successful that people began planning their train routes specifically to pass through Gordonsville. Travelers would deliberately choose trains that stopped in this small Virginia town because they knew they'd encounter these women and their extraordinary food. By 1869, writer George W. Bagby officially declared Gordonsville the fried chicken capital of the world, a title earned entirely through the business success of Black women entrepreneurs. One of these women was Bella Winston, who learned the trade from her mother. In 1970, when Bella was 80 years old, she told a local newspaper something that perfectly captures what these women achieved. "My mother paid for this place with chicken legs." Think about that. A formerly enslaved woman used fried chicken sales to purchase property in post-Civil War America. She built generational wealth from recipes passed down through her family, turning culinary knowledge into real estate ownership. The waiter carriers continued operating successfully until the early 20th century, when dining cars were added to trains and new government regulations restricted platform vendors. But their impact was undeniable. They had created one of the first successful fast food operations in American history. But success breeds resentment. And when that success comes from people you've been told are inferior, it breeds something even worse: a need to tear down what you can't control. White America had watched black women build empires out of chicken coops. They'd seen the crowds, the profits, the property ownership, the national recognition, and they decided that if they couldn't stop black success, they'd do the next best thing. They'd turn it into a racist stereotype. Here's where the story gets ugly. Because when black people started making real money from fried chicken, certain white folks couldn't handle it. They saw our success and decided to turn it into shame. They took our achievement and made it a joke. They weaponized our food against us. The transformation began in the minstrel shows of the late 1800s. White performers in blackface started portraying black people as obsessed with stealing and eating chicken. The message was clear. If black people were associated with chicken, it wasn't because they were skilled entrepreneurs or successful business owners. It was because they were simple-minded thieves who couldn't control their appetites. This racist narrative got a massive boost in 1915, when D.W. Griffith's film, The Birth of a Nation, included scenes of black people eating fried chicken in legislative halls. The movie portrayed black political participation as a joke, with fried chicken as a symbol of black people being unfit for civilization. But the real masterpiece of racist marketing came in 1925, when a white man named Maxon Lester Graham opened a restaurant in Salt Lake City, Utah. He called it Chicken Inn. Graham had taken everything that black women like Bella Winston and the waiter carriers had built: the reputation for excellent fried chicken, the business success, the customer loyalty, and turned it into the most degrading restaurant concept imaginable. The restaurant's logo featured a grotesque caricature of a black man with exaggerated red lips, a winking eye, and a porter's hat. But here's the most insulting part. Customers had to walk through a giant version of this grinning black face to enter the restaurant. They literally had to pass through the mouth of this racist caricature to get their food. Think about the psychology of this. White families would drive out for dinner and enter through the mouth of a caricatured black face. They'd eat chicken prepared in the style that black women had perfected, while surrounded by imagery that mocked those same women as inferior and ridiculous. Graham was making a fortune by selling both the food that black people had mastered and the stereotype that diminished their achievement. He had found a way to profit from black culinary excellence while simultaneously denying black people credit for creating it. In Seattle, the NAACP and the Northwest Enterprise newspaper launched a 2-year legal battle against the restaurant. Black attorney Clarence R. Anderson, newspaper editor William H. Wilson, and civil rights advocate Horace R. Caton filed complaints demanding that Graham change his advertising or face charges of libel and defamation. The protests achieved some small victories. Graham agreed to remove offensive language from his delivery cars and repaint parts of the restaurant. But he claimed the restaurant name was copyrighted and refused to change it. The core business model, profiting from racist imagery while serving food in the tradition that black women had created, continued for decades. The inn stayed in business until the late 1940s. For over 20 years, it served as a monument to how whites could take black success and turn it into white profit while simultaneously destroying black dignity. But here's what they never wanted you to discover. While they were busy creating stereotypes and building racist restaurants, black people were still making serious money from fried chicken. The propaganda machine was working overtime to hide one inconvenient truth: the financial success never stopped. You see, Graham and others like him had a problem. They could build all the racist restaurants they wanted, create all the degrading imagery they could imagine, but they couldn't change the fundamental reality. Black people were still getting rich off fried chicken. In fact, some were making more money than the white folks trying to mock them. The racist restaurants were profitable, sure, but you know what was even more profitable? Actually being skilled at cooking fried chicken. And despite all the stereotypes, despite all the mockery, black entrepreneurs kept proving that their success was no accident.